Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoyed this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Henry staggered back to his shack, dragging his feet. He had been loading heavy sacks of sugar at the market all day, exhausted, and paid a pittance by those dodgy peddlers. He was in no mood at all. The guy thought, what kind of life is this dog's life? And a doghouse to match. Somebody is getting fat, and somebody is getting by with bread on water. Why is everything so unfair? Suddenly, there was a squeak and a movement in the bushes in front of the rich man's house. Without thinking, Henry rushed over there. I don't know if an animal needs help. What he saw shocked him. There was a bag, tightly tied with several knots, and something in it was moving faintly. The lad could barely manage to untie it and was dumbfounded. There was a helpless little puppy panting and shaking with hunger. It was shaking with hunger, fear and cold, and whimpering desperately, trying to survive and get out of the trap. Henry was indignant. What kind of an animal has done this? What kind of beast would do such a thing? You don't need a puppy, just let him go. Let him be homeless but alive. Why so cruel? The boy shoved the poor thing under his arm, wrapped it in his jacket, and ran to his place faster than the wind. This puppy reminded Henry of himself, just as abandoned and unwanted. The first thing he did was to get the little guy drunk. He drank water long and greedily. Then he poured the rest of the milk out and crumbled some bread into it. There was nothing else to eat. The puppy was happy about that too, and ate it all in a second. The saucer was clean. Henry took the curly-haired cub in his arms and peered closer, scratching its ear as he did so. He reasoned, strange. He's well-groomed, wearing an expensive leather collar, shiny and flea-free, and he doesn't look unloved. What am I going to feed him then? I do not always have food myself. Besides, this puppy is big. Looks like a Labrador, a very massive bone. Expensive and purebred. Probably costs a lot of money. What happened? The puppy, having calmed down and warmed up, immediately fell asleep in Henry's arms, and he did not dare to move, and sat there stroking his tummy, remembering his difficult childhood. Susan's mother raised Henry alone. Her father never existed. They lived in the suburbs in a modest one-room apartment. From a very young age, Henry understood how hard it was for his mother. After all, she worked as a simple cleaner, paid a penny, and they saved literally everything about his father, where he was, and why he did not live with them. The boy did not ask his mother. She would immediately start crying. In kindergarten and at school, Henry was often teased as a beggar, ridiculed for his washed and old clothes, and shunned. The boy was very hurt. He often cried and tried to fight, especially wounded his childish soul by the words, "Oh, look, here comes the son of the cleaner." The boy would literally go berserk from that and would throw his fists at his abusers, trying to defend his mother's honor. Henry began to work part-time early, secretly from his mother. He wanted to help her and at least buy something for himself. He remembered his first paycheck for sure. A neighbor had asked the teenager to paint a fence, and he promised a generous payout. The poor kid spent the whole day with a brush and roller in the sun, burned and tired. But he did it to his credit. He was so proud of himself. The handful of change and a few bills his neighbor gave him seemed like a fortune. Henry immediately ran to the store and bought a roll of sausage and candy. His mother, when she came home from work that evening, was very surprised at how he got such luxury, and his son proudly replied, "I earned it myself. I painted Uncle Phil's fence. Tell me, Mom, I'm good, aren't I?" The woman hugged her son, stroked his naughty curls, and said affectionately, "You're my hero and well done. A real mama's helper, a man. I'm proud of you." These mother's words struck so deep into the teenager's soul that from then on he often began to take up any part-time work to please the dearest and closest person. He would help someone he knew to assemble furniture or unload something. Henry had no friends in class, so he decided not to go to the prom at all. He didn't have to endure the stares and mockery. My mother was very upset at the time. How could it be, my son? It's a once-in-a-lifetime holiday. I'll ask Aunt Clara for a suit. Sam's grown out of it anyway, so you can relax and hang out with your friends. And we'll give you as much money as you need. I'll borrow it from my boss at work, and then with every paycheck I'll give it back a little at a time. But Henry shook his head stubbornly. "No, Mom, I'm not going. I don't have any friends there. And if they see me in a Sam costume, they'll laugh at me. And I don't need to go into debt. I don't have any money. I'm just glad school's finally over. I'll go get my diploma later. I'll go to work, I'll help you. I'll be rich soon and I'll rub their noses in it. You'll see." The woman just threw up her hands. "How are you going to work?" "As what?" "A longshoreman again. Sonny, you need to study, at least finish college, get a profession. Then you can find a better job. Look at me, I'm 43. And I look 60, and I look 60, and I have a lot of illnesses. I spend all my money on these medicines. And all because once dropped out of university, now so sorry. No one can get a decent job without an education. Is that the fate you want for yourself, too? You've got golden hands, you've repaired all the appliances at home yourself 100 times. And you've studied well. Don't be silly. Listen to your mother. And your health should be valued and protected." But Henry was as stubborn as a bull and stood his ground. "What a comparison you made, too. You're a woman, and I'm a young and healthy guy. They'll take me anywhere. I'm not wasting another 3 years. I'm going to work at the mall. I've checked. You can get a job there at 18. The naive young man thought that he would make a lot of money this way and be able to get fabulously rich, not realizing yet that it was the hardest, lowest paid work, which took so much energy and health. And then her mother's health from hard, back-breaking labor had become fragile. Her heart began to fail. Her blood pressure skyrocketed all the time. And Henry began to work for 3 people, often staying after work to unload. He tried his best to earn more and help his mother, to buy her necessary medicines, pitied her and loved her very much. But despite all his efforts, Mom got worse and worse, and a year later she died. It was a terrible grief for the boy. He longed for his mother. He missed a kind word, support, warmth of her hands so much. His personal life was not going well either. On the outside, Henry was an attractive guy, tall, athletic, lean, and the girls were eager to meet him. But as soon as they found out that he was a simple longshoreman with no education and no prospects, the relationship immediately went down the drain. The guy suffered from loneliness so much that he couldn't stand it and gave up. The cunning traffickers quickly realized who was in front of them and dashingly cheated him through a drunken encounter, taking away his apartment. Or rather, he himself signed all the documents, being in a drunken stupor, to the black realtors. So Henry became homeless and went downhill. He lived in an abandoned shack on the edge of town, ate what he could, and led a miserable existence. He didn't even want to live, only to get drunk and forget himself again, and so on in a circle every day. And recently he had a dream about his mother crying, looking at him with mute reproach and begging, "Henry, my son, please don't drink. Wake up, son. It hurts my heart to look at you. I didn't think you'd turn out like this." The boy woke up in a cold sweat and fell to his knees. He whispered into the darkness, "Forgive me, Mummy. I'm sorry to disappoint you again. I swear I won't drink another drop. You have my word. Do you believe me? I just feel so bad without you." From that day on, Henry didn't drink and he didn't want a drop. He'd turned in all the empty liquor bottles. He'd told all his buddies off, and he'd even cleaned up the shack. And now he found this puppy. Henry named the puppy Buddy, bought him porridge and cheap ground chicken, and began to raise him. But he quickly realized that the puppy is big and eats more than he does, and he simply can't keep him for long. So the guy decided to go to the rich people's house and ask them if maybe the puppy was lost. Maybe they were looking for him? Without much hope, the tramp rang the doorbell of the elite mansion, holding his foundling behind his bosom. The door was opened by a pretty young girl. She struck Henry as some kind of princess from a fairy tale. Her long, smooth as silk black hair was intricately arranged in a beautiful bun, and her almond-shaped brown eyes with long, fluffy lashes were simply bewitching, a real oriental beauty. The guy was so confused that he blushed like a boiled crawfish. She asked in surprise, "Good afternoon. Who are you looking for? Are you at the right address?" Henry, greatly embarrassed, answered, "Hello. I wanted to ask you something." And he pulled out a baby boy from the sinus. The girl jumped for joy. "Richie, my good man. Oh, my God, you're here. Come here, my baby. I put an ad on the polls and on the internet." But no one responded. The puppy began to tear and wag his tail happily, obviously recognizing his mistress. She took him in her arms and began to kiss his wet nose and cry, "Thank you very much. You're coming in. My name is Kristen. I've been crying my eyes out. I missed my little prankster so much. Where did you find him? I can't figure out how he got in the street." The tramp was embarrassed, but made his way into the courtyard. "My name is Henry. I live around here, in a shack on the outskirts. I work as a longshoreman at the market, and sometimes there's no work at all. And the other day I'm walking home, and I hear a squeak in the bushes, and there's a bag tied tightly, and a puppy in it. So I set him free, fed and sheltered him. Who's been doing that to him? That's cruel. You should take care of him. Do not give offense. I would have kept him. Very fond of him, but I eat what I have to. It would be hard to contain such a large dog." Kristen frowned and became serious. "The sack, you say? Well, all right. I'll take care of it. I've got some thoughts on that. Don't worry, I'm not letting Richie out of my sight. Look, Henry, I need a janitor and a gardener. Uncle Robert, who's been with us for years, is retiring. And the grounds, as you can see, are huge. It is necessary to keep an eye on everything, to clean, to trim bushes. I will pay decently without deceit. You can even live in the maid's cottage. There is a spare room. But I have two conditions, not to drink and not to be lazy." Henry was overjoyed. He couldn't have dreamed of such happiness. It was getting colder outside. Winter was coming, and the shack had nothing but holes in the roof. He had no idea how he would survive there. So he gladly accepted the offer. "Thank you, Kristen. I won't let you down. I'll work hard. I'm used to hard work. I've given up drinking completely, so I won't have a problem with that either. I'll take care of Richie, too, because it's a shame to let him go. He's a funny puppy." That's how Henry came to work for the Brown family. The boy quickly got the hang of it, made friends with the cook and the driver and the elderly maid, Margaret, and became a friend. From them, he learned the history of the house and its owners. Kristen's father was a well-known businessman who owned a chain of restaurants in town. Her mother died early when the girl was only 2 years old. Her father raised her alone. He never married again. He must have been a one-woman man. Everyone spoke fondly of Kristen, saying she was a good, kind, fair girl. A year ago, her father became seriously ill. For a long time, he couldn't figure out what was wrong. Nothing bothered him except weakness and sleepiness. But he put it down to constant lack of sleep and stress at work. Then a cough wouldn't go away for a long time. And when he finally went to a specialist, it was too late. He had terminal cancer. He was treated in Israel, in the best clinic, but still a year later the man died. Kristen was by his bedside until her last breath. When she learned of her father's illness, she immediately rushed home from abroad, where she studied at the University of Economics. That's how Kristen became a rich heiress. After all the businessman's assets and money had passed by right to her. The girl was not confused and did not sell the company, actively penetrated into her father's business, though it was not easy for her yet. She was about to have a wedding. Preparations were in full swing. But her fiancé, Danny, was not well spoken of by the staff, Margaret grumbled. He's a trickster, for crying out loud. I don't know who he is or where he's from. I don't know who he is or where he's from. I asked around. Nobody knows his family. He's just a stranger. He's nasty. His eyes are moving all the time. I think he's hiding something. Oh, and we will cry more with him and his mother paralyzed. It turns out that Kristen's fiancé has a sick, paralyzed mother, and the groom had already moved her to the mansion, so he wouldn't have to leave her alone. Henry was perplexed at first. Well, he's good, Danny. You can't leave your mother alone like that, can you? I wouldn't leave her either. He's the closest thing I've got to family. Eddie's chauffeur besieged the guy. Don't jump to conclusions. When you see this Danny and his mother for yourself, you'll talk differently. He's a real piece of work. The very next day, Henry had to meet him. He was sweeping the area, removing the attacking yellow leaves and playing with Richie by throwing him a stick. The puppy barked happily and carried it back in his teeth. Danny was the one who came out on the porch, an unpleasantly glossy-looking prick with thin, pursed lips. The dog had just rolled under his feet, scattering leaves as he went. He grimaced and kicked the dog, hissing at him. Get out of here, you shaggy brat! You're getting in my way. Get in the doghouse. The dog whimpered pitifully and pressed his ears together in fear of another blow. Henry's insides rumbled. He now knew exactly who had thrown Richie out into the bushes to his doom. The janitor called for the puppy. Richie, come here. Come with me, baby. Let's get out of the way. Let me take pity on you. Henry stroked the dog, and the dog followed him trustingly, knowing that he would not hurt him. Danny suddenly called out to Henry, Who are you? What are you doing here? Look at you. You're the protector. I haven't seen you before. The guy replied, Good afternoon. I am the new janitor and gardener, replacing Robert. My name is Henry. I live and work here. Don't yell. I'll get Richie out of here. He's just a kid. He's just playing around. Danny surged. Don't you tell me what to do. I know whether to shout or not. You've all gone wild here. A dog must know his place. He must be brought up hard, not cuddly. Well, soon everything will be mine. I'll kick you out at once to hell. And that stinking dog, too. Kristen came out into the courtyard. How beautiful she looked in her light coat and tweed boots, all fresh with a blush on her cheeks. When Danny saw her, he jumped up, smiled sweetly, and fawned all over her. This so piqued Henry, couldn't Kristen see that her fiancé was fake to the core? How was she going to live with him? The guy realized that he had fallen in love with his mistress. He was just lost. He couldn't look at her, couldn't admire her, couldn't breathe on her. Kristen called out to Henry, Good morning. How do you like working here? Are you enjoying yourselves? Do you have any requests or suggestions? Henry blushed with embarrassment and answered quietly, Thank you, it's great. I'm trying. I'm going to trim the trees today, and I'm going to clean the bathhouse. Kristen said, Wonderful. I would like to ask you. Margaret will be taking care of Danny's mother today, changing the sheets and so on. You should help her. It's hard to lift a bedridden woman on your own. She'll call you in the house when she needs you. The owners left, and Henry went about his usual duties. Danny arrived home before Kristen glared angrily at the janitor and went into the house. Soon Margaret yelled for Henry to come help, but before she did, she asked them to move the heavy oak dresser to clean it. While they were fiddling with the chest of drawers, Henry overheard a quiet conversation between Danny and his mother. She hissed angrily at her son. "What are you stalling for? I'm going to be here a long time playing dead. I'm already stiff. At least I'm walking around a bit at night. I'm going to get bed sores. Come on, get your bride out of the way. And it's time to take over the house." Danny answered her quietly. "Are you crazy?" "Not yet. I have to marry her officially. Then I'll get everything. In the meantime, I'm nobody here. And you even less so. So stay quiet. As soon as the wedding is over, I'll slip her some poison, a good drug. Her heart will stop, and that's it. No one will determine the cause of death. You don't risk it. You don't drink champagne. So be patient. It won't be long now. The restaurant is already booked." Margaret was old and a little deaf, and she couldn't understand the details of the conversation. But Henry was stunned. The woman was in real danger. He decided to double. Check what he had heard that he might have misunderstood or misheard. When they were moving Danny's mother with Margaret, he supposedly accidentally pinched her toe a little. If she really was paralyzed, she wouldn't even feel it. He watched Catherine's facial expressions. She cringed in pain and almost cried out. But then she recovered herself and was silent. So it was true, and she was definitely faking it. Henry thought feverishly of how to tell his mistress, how to warn her. After all, poor Kristen was blindly believing the scoundrel. But would she believe him? But the boy decided, even if she kicked him out, it didn't matter, but he had to tell her everything. He waited patiently for Kristen to arrive, and as soon as the girl drove the car into the garage, Henry slipped in unnoticed. He shut the garage door from the inside and began to speak hurriedly. "Kristen, listen, I have to warn you. You're in grave danger. Please listen to me and take me seriously. I care about you very much, and I couldn't bear it if something bad happened." A surprised Kristen only blinked. She didn't understand anything yet, but she could see that Henry wasn't kidding. He looked pale and very scared, and she said, "What happened?" "Everything seems to be fine. The wedding's coming up. Danny loves me. I don't understand. What's wrong?" The guy started the story in a confused way. "Margaret and I were moving furniture today, and I overheard Danny talking to his mother. Well, she's not paralyzed at all. Not only that, your fiancé doesn't love you at all. He's only going to marry you for your money and your wealth. And after the wedding, he's going to poison you so that you die of a heart attack, and he gets all your father's inheritance. I'll tell you more." I decided to check everything and deliberately pinched Catherine's finger. She instantly cringed in pain. "But how is that possible? Also, your fiancé hates Richie. I saw him yelling and kicking him myself. I'm sure he threw him in a sack to his certain death." Kristen was dumbfounded and babbled. "It just can't be. Are you sure you're not lying? Although, it's really weird what happened to Richie." "Oh my God. Is it really true?" Henry asked. "How did you meet Danny? What do you know about him and his family?" Kristen wondered. To be honest, it all happened so suddenly. He came to my table in a restaurant, started showering me with compliments and courting me gallantly. That's how we met. Danny works at the company ISTA as deputy director. I think they make cabinet furniture, but that company is in another city. And the family. He didn't say anything about his father, as he had been living abroad for a long time, except that he was still worried about his sick mother, and he begged me to move her to our mansion before the wedding, so as not to leave her alone. I agreed. It was so noble of him, touching care for a loved one. Although I agree with you, Catherine, he's a very unpleasant person. Maybe it's because of her illness, Henry hotly parried. I asked around. No one knows anything about your fiancé's family, and they've never heard of such a company. Isn't that strange? You should check it out. Please don't rush into the wedding. I'm really worried about you. Kristen became serious and said quietly, Thank you, Henry, for your vigilance. I'll get a police officer I know to double. Check everything. Also, you can make some excuse to put hidden cameras around the house, especially in Catherine's room and Danny's office. If everything you say is true, we'll soon see. Henry replied, and you tell the groom and his mother to check the wiring everywhere and invite a specialist, and I'll sort of help him and discreetly do everything. I will not let anyone hurt you because you are my guardian angel. Know it? So they did. Henry discreetly set up some hidden cameras, and Kristen asked an operative she knew to find out everything she could about Danny's family. And she began to look at him differently herself. Now she noticed that her fiancé actually yelled and called Richie names when she wasn't around, clearly not liking him. But that's not what he says to her face. How nice that the puppy was found. It's so sad without him. It's scary to think what could have happened to him. And there were many such small inconsistencies in 2 weeks. And the groom's mother, Catherine, looked at her so strangely and unkindly at times, it gave her the creeps. It was as if the girl's rose-colored glasses had fallen off. Why hadn't she noticed all this before? That night she got a call from that same police acquaintance, Jason, and said, Kristen, I have some bad news. Are you home right now? Your fiancé too? A concerned Kristen replied, Yes. We're all home, about to have dinner. What did you find out? Tell me, don't keep me in suspense. Jason continued, This is not a telephone conversation. It's much more serious than that. I'm going to come with a group, but in the meantime you just pretend like everything's okay. You got it, I'll tell you when I get there. Kristen went all pale and even felt sick. Danny noticed the bride's anxiety and asked, Love, who called? You're not yourself? Is something wrong? Kristen, not knowing what to come up with, replied, A friend of mine from the university called. She and I used to be very close, just like sisters. She's coming over now. She has problems in her personal life. Her fiancé left her, the bastard. She wants advice. Danny relaxed. I see. So it's women's problems again. Okay, then I'll eat and be in my office. I can't stand women's tears. You better get rid of her soon. I missed you so much. The family ate dinner and Danny retired to his office. Soon a police car pulled up and Kristen quietly opened the door. 3 operatives entered the yard. Jason put his finger to his lips, called Henry from the yard, and they secluded themselves in his maid's room. Jason said, Well, let's see what we got on the security cameras during this time. Do you have the footage with you? Just in the car, and let's take a look without attracting attention. For some reason, I get the feeling there's a lot to see, because your fiancé, Kristen, is a professional hustler and crook, and his mother isn't his mother at all, but an accomplice of Katherine Johnson. The couple has long been wanted in their town, so this time they decided to do the same thing in the neighboring town. The paralyzed mother. It was their trump card, so they pressed the pity and forced the naive bride to admire the groom. They say, What a noble, what a wonderful, loving son. It worked, didn't it? And you believed it too. It's true that it never came to murder before. They usually drove brides insane by drugging them, thus rendering them incompetent. So what do we got? Kristen was horrified when she saw on camera her paralyzed mother walking around the house at night and Danny openly discussing with her the plan to kill his fiancée in great detail. They were discussing how much poison to put in to make her die or to make her suffer. Jason even whistled, What nerve! He's not afraid of anything. Well, he's going to get hurt. Come on, let's go inside. The operation's about to begin. Everybody be ready. One of the operatives stepped abruptly into Danny's office and deftly twisted his arms behind his back. Danny screamed in surprise. What's going on? Who are you people? Kristen, this is an outrage. What are these people doing in our house? But the policeman sieged him. Shut your mouth. You, Citizen Johnson, are suspected of attempted murder and fraud against your fiancée, Kristen Brown. And we have hard evidence. The other two staff members and Henry went to the bedridden patient's room. Jason sharply threw back the blanket. "Let's go, Mother. The concert is over. We know all about you, Katherine Johnson. You and Danny Johnson have been scamming such naive, rich heiresses. How many have you had so far? 2, if I'm not mistaken. But I see you've overstepped your bounds. You've even decided to commit murder. Fraud isn't enough for you. Your appetite is growing." With unprecedented vigor, the supposedly paralyzed Katherine jumped out of bed and tried to jump out the window. But Henry was not confused and grabbed her by the hem of her nightgown. There was the sound of tearing fabric, and Katherine collapsed to the floor. The woman hissed at him, "Hands off, pauper. This is all your fault. Ever since you came into this house, everything's gone wrong. You're the one who ratted everybody out, aren't you?" Kristen couldn't believe what was happening. Everything that was happening seemed like a horror movie to her. Yesterday she had been a happy bride, and today she found herself being held in the arms of scoundrels and crooks who wanted to kill her. There was no love at all. It was Danny's monstrous cynicism that killed her. She emotionally ran up to him and slapped him across the face. "That's how you love me. I believed you, didn't I? How could you? Why did you go behind my back? Answer me. You'd have had it all anyway." Danny grinned wryly. "No, not all of them. You're the heiress, not me. Because it's not fair when some people get everything and some people get everything and some people get nothing. Though I must say I do like you. You're a good-looking girl. But you're so righteous and tedious. You're boring as hell, Kristen. And if it wasn't for that nosy beggar, I'd be fine. I'd be swimming in your money and living like a king." Kristen burst into tears, and Jason added, "And now we finally caught you red-handed. So instead of red caviar, you're going to eat prison gruel, and so is your accomplice. And you, Alexander, I thank you for your vigilance. In fact, it was you who saved Anastasia. Kristen, don't cry. Consider this day a second birthday. And from now on, be more careful with your new acquaintances. As you can see, there are more scammers than normal people." Danny and Katherine were taken to the police car and taken to the station, and Kristen continued to sit on the buffet and sob uncontrollably, unable to stop herself. She was disgraced, crushed, and morally destroyed. Henry was worried about his hostess and didn't know how to approach her to help her. So he took the first bottle he could find from the bar, uncorked it, poured a full glass, and held it out to Kristen. "You need to drink, all at once, in a gulp, to relax. It will help." Kristen put her trembling hands on the glass and took a sip or two. The hard liquor burned her throat so hard she choked and coughed. And then, catching her breath, she said, "I don't know how to go on living, Henry. Who is to be trusted? If the one I love is a traitor, my father and mother are dead. I'm alone, all alone, and these damn millions bring me nothing but grief." The boy gently took her hand and whispered, "You can trust me. I'll be like a faithful dog, always by your side, at your feet. I won't betray you, and I won't give you up, because I love you. You are so. You are the best and the most unattainable for me." Kristen was taken aback. She clearly hadn't expected such a sincere confession from her janitor. She didn't know what to say, so she said quietly, "Thank you, Henry. You saved my life, and now I owe you one, too. I'm very grateful to you. Now, go. I need to be alone." From that day on, Kristen and Henry began to talk a lot. The girl took a different view of this guy, especially after his sincere and ardent confession. At first it was all innocent. They walked with Ricci for hours, Kristen talking about herself, about her mother, whom she barely remembered, about her beloved daddy, whose loss she still couldn't come to terms with. And Henry, too, was open about his miserable fate, hiding nothing, and about the death of her mother, and how he had foolishly drunk his apartment, and how he had not understood the importance of education. And now he wandered around the world, needing no one and bitterly regretting it all. Both of them were easy and good together. There were no secrets and misunderstandings, and one day they crossed the line. Henry was no longer an unkempt hobo. He dressed normally, cut his hair, and was no different from any other young boy. Kristen herself didn't realize when or how she had fallen in love with him. He just surrounded her with such care, was always there for her, supported her, and looked at her so much. The guy really loved his mistress so much that if she told him to go and drown himself, he would surely do it. One night, Henry stayed up late in the kitchen, drinking tea and talking about everything. It was time to go to bed. Kristen was putting the dishes away when she felt Henry's strong arms around her waist. The boy began to stroke her and kiss her shyly, then more boldly and more passionately. Kristen tried to resist. "Sash, what are you doing? Are you crazy? It's not right. We shouldn't. What people will say." But the boy could no longer stop. He whispered to her, as if in a delirium, "Beautiful, tender, most beloved, don't drive me away. I can't go on, I'm burning with you. I can't breathe without you." And she sailed on, swirling in a whirlpool of passion, waking up in the same bed in Kristen's bedroom. The boy was sound asleep, spreading his muscular arms wide, and the girl was frantically thinking, "My God, what am I doing? First a crook, now a tramp. Tell anyone, they will laugh. I can imagine how I will be washed up all the bones of everyone. On the other hand, who cares? I don't give a damn about anybody. This is my life and no one else's. Sasha loves me sincerely. What could be more valuable? He saved my life. Whatever happens, I feel so good with him." From there, their nights became regular, and a month later, Kristen realized she was pregnant. She was both happy and shocked at the same time. From that day on, the couple began to live together. Kristen got Henry a job at her father's restaurant, first as an assistant cook. After all, he had no education. The boy turned out to be so savvy, loved cooking, showed imagination and creativity, and soon became a chef. 3 months later, it was discovered at a sonogram that Kristen was having triplets. What a twist. She didn't see it coming. Everyone she knew turned their fingers to the side of their heads and whispered in the corners. The rich heiress has gone completely insane, pregnant with triplets from a tramp. She picked him up off the street. No family name, no position, no education. She doesn't have it all. Not like the good people. Couldn't she have found a bridegroom of her own standing? From high society. She may be young and beautiful, but she's a fool. But Kristen didn't care about all the gossip. She and Henry applied to the registry office, and they went everywhere together, to all the events, to visit. One day they went to the famous Foley businessman. They owned a pizza chain in town, and often crossed paths with Kristen's father's company on business. It was at this dinner that there was to be an important conversation about a possible merger of their companies into one huge chain. A maid greeted them on the threshold of the huge mansion, helped Kristen undress. Then she approached Henry. But as soon as he turned to face her, the woman shrieked wildly and collapsed. The guests ran in, screaming. They started splashing water on her. The maid woke up, began to cross herself and wail, "Save! Lord, and have mercy. The dead man has risen." Kristen and Henry were dumbfounded and couldn't figure it out. Maybe she had the boy confused with someone else. But then the owner, Scott Foley, came out screaming. He took one look at Henry and immediately went pale, grabbed his heart, and began to fall to the floor. Henry was already frightened himself and looked in the mirror. What's going on? Do I look like a demon? Or am I not reflected in the mirror? Why does everyone mistake me for some kind of ghost? Scott began to come to his senses and said, "Hello, son. We meet at last. I'm your birth father, that's how it happens. And they confused you with your twin brother, Christopher. He died not long ago. It hasn't been 40 days yet. Now Henry was getting sick and all he could do was babble. How's the father? Like a twin brother. Why didn't I know anything about it? And my mother never once mentioned it. Tell me everything, for God's sake. What the hell is going on here? Scott sighed and began the story. It was a long time ago. I was still a student in my last year of economics. I had an affair with a girl, Susan. I wasn't really in love with her, but I was really into her. Flowers, candy, moonlight walks, just like everybody else. And then all of a sudden she got pregnant with twins. All were shocked, because it is a little early. They are almost children themselves. But it couldn't be helped. I had to get married. That time was different. I passed my final exams and got my diploma, but Susan never finished her studies. But they're both yesterday's students. No money, no living expenses. And there were no conditions. No money at all. We had to make do with odd jobs. Susan gave birth to twins, named them Christopher and Henry. But our young family couldn't take the hardships. We couldn't live together. We fought day and night. Susan was insanely jealous of me. I was a fool, too. I hadn't had enough of it yet. All in all, both are good. What can I say? 6 months. We'd been getting on each other's nerves. We decided to get a divorce. Susan told me right away, whatever you want, but I can't handle 2 kids by myself. I just want to be able to handle one. So you take one and I'll take one, fair and square. It seems wild now, but back then, when I was young, I didn't have the brains to think that we were ruining our brothers' lives. Not our own. I kept Christopher. He was stronger. He slept well. Susan took you and went to the other side of town. So we lived apart, never crossed paths again. I managed to rise in the wild 90s, got rich, got married, opened a chain of pizzerias. With Kate, my second wife. We lived together, but God never gave us any more children together. She accepted Christopher as her own, loved him sincerely. She did not want him. Christopher lived in luxury. He did not need anything. He grew up properly, graduated from college, got married, started doing business with me. He was a good guy, a smart guy, and recently he was killed, shot in broad daylight. And it's all clear. The investigators still don't have a single clue. My son went to negotiate and never came back. I can't tell you how sorry I am. That's why when I saw you, I thought Christopher was back from that Susan. You look just like him, don't you? Henry listened, dumbfounded and bewildered. But it's been so many years. Why didn't you come looking for me? Didn't you care at all about your other son's life? My mother and I were struggling to get by, counting pennies, living in misery. And your mother, why didn't she tell me I had a brother? She was dying in my arms, and she said nothing. That's sacrilege. We could have been friends. We could have talked. Oh, my God. What have you done, you parents? Scott's head was down. He had nothing to complain about. I know, son. What I did was very nasty, and my mother was wrong, too. I wanted to find you after Christopher died, but then I thought about it. What am I going to tell you? What kind of eyes would I look at you with? I was embarrassed, so I didn't even look for you. I thought you hated me. Turns out you didn't even know you had a father. I'm sorry, Henry. If you can, don't hold it against me. I'd like to get along with you, if you don't mind, and make up for the stupid years I've lost. Henry sat there, pale as chalk, shaking as if he had fever. He answered quietly, I don't know what to tell you yet, Dad. Let me think about it. I just want you to show me the pictures and my brother's grave. At least I'll visit him after he dies. I want to sob, howl, scream. I can't tell you what's happening to me now. The soiree was crumpled up, and Henry stared at his brother's picture for a long time. He saw himself, only with a different haircut and a mole above his right eyebrow, but the same face. At home, Henry could not come to his senses. Everything inside him was bubbling. Why is everything like this? He had lived with his mother all his life and thought they were the only family in the world. But it turned out that he and his brother had walked in the same city, breathed the same air, and knew nothing about each other. They weren't even given the chance to meet, talk, and socialize for once. How was that fair? Kristen saw how difficult it was for Henry and tried to comfort him. Cute. I understand how you feel. You're angry, resentful of your father and mother, and you're right about a lot of things. But look on the bright side. It's their mistakes, and it's not for us to judge them. It's the past. You can't take it back. Your mother and brother are in the grave, but your father is alive and wants to talk to you. Maybe you should not refuse and try to establish relations. He is, after all, a blood relative, soon to be a grandfather. Think about it. Henry wondered, maybe you're right. I don't know. The question on my mind is, how and why did Christopher die? It's not the 90s, is it, to take out the competition like that, shooting them in broad daylight? I need to get to the bottom of this. I can't leave it at that. Can you help me do that? Kristen agreed. I could go back to Jason. After all, he found out about Danny pretty quickly, got to the truth. Maybe he could help here, too. I'll call him right now and ask him to meet me. Henry rejoiced. How much I love you, dear. Thank you for your understanding. In the meantime, I'll talk to Christopher's widow and see if she can clarify anything. I'm sure the poor woman is grieving. Maybe she needs help. The next day, Henry went to the house of Olivia, his late brother's wife, wanting to have a heart talk with her, to find out everything about Van, some way to cheer her up, to comfort her. He came to the gate of the good quality mansion, and through the fence he saw an interesting picture. A shish kebab was roasting in the yard. A table was laid out, and a young, pretty blonde girl was sitting in the arms of a stout young man, laughing with glee. Henry was taken aback. What a widow. I thought she was grieving. It's not even 40 days since Vanya's death, and she's having a great time. And with another man. The boy knocked, and the girl, with a look of obvious dissatisfaction on her face, went to open the door. She turned pale and retreated into the courtyard, babbling incoherently. Christopher. Oh, my God. You're dead, Mommy. Go away, it doesn't work like that. The man with whom Olivia had just cooed also chickened out and began to baptize. Henry said, Good afternoon, Olivia. I'm not Christopher. I'm Henry, his twin brother. Unfortunately, I just found out the other day that I had a brother, and I was very upset that he died. So I wanted to talk to you. I thought you could tell me about him, but I see you're a little busy. I'll probably come back another time. Olivia realized that she looked ridiculous and tried to justify herself. We're here on business. It's really better some other time. I'm sorry. Henry left and informed Jason of what he had seen. You should check the alibi of this inconsolable widow. I personally saw her today laughing and cooing with another man, even though her husband died tragically a short time ago. Something doesn't make sense. She's not grief-stricken. She's having a good time. The operative whistled. It's very interesting. Maybe we really were looking in the wrong place. Especially since the competitors have an ironclad alibi, you can't get anything wrong. Thank you for the information. I will personally check everything. Henry didn't stop there and decided to talk to his father. He was overjoyed to see him, fussing. Son Henry, come in. Good of you to come. So you forgive me. Henry replied, You know, Dad, if you remember the old days, don't you see the old days? You're about to become a grandfather. Kristen has triplets. We'll hang out. You'll see our grandchildren. Why are we fighting? That's why I'm here. Tell me about Olivia, Christopher's wife. How did they live? Did she love him at all? Scott sighed. It's not an easy story. Christopher couldn't find a date for a long time, and we were getting worried. And then, 3 years ago, he finally announced that he had fallen in love and was bringing his bride to meet him. My wife and I were overjoyed and laid the table. But when we saw this vulgar and promiscuous person, just stunned. It turns out that her son met her in a cafe. She worked there as a waitress and fell in love so. if only to disappear. And the girl was no stranger to love. She realized that the groom was promising and clung to him like a deadbolt. Soon they were married, but family life can hardly be called happy. Children Olivia categorically did not want on a farm, too, did almost nothing, and only knew that to go to boutiques and spend money. Besides, she told her son many times that she was cheating on him, but he didn't believe her. When her son was killed, Olivia didn't shed a tear at the funeral, though she tried to look sad. We don't talk to each other now, that's how it is. Henry was shocked and told Scott about what he had seen in Christopher's yard. I thought I'd come over and have a heart-to-heart talk with her, and she'd tell me about her brother, what he was like. Maybe show me a picture. I thought she was going to tell me about my brother, what he was like, maybe show me a picture of him. Her eyes flashed. She looked frightened, as if she had been caught doing something naughty. And the man that he immediately fussed? For the life of me, but only lovers behave like that. Would a grief-stricken woman have any interest in having fun with men? If she was mourning her husband, I've told my operative, Jason, to double-check everything. I'd like to go to my brother's grave. Will you show me where it is? Henry and his father went to the cemetery, buying flowers and cognac on the way. They also bought a wreath that said, "From my brother, rest in peace." When he saw the grave, where there was no monument yet, strewn with fresh flowers and wreaths, he could not stand the heat of emotion and fell straight to the damp ground, whispering, "Hello, my brother Christopher. We didn't get to see each other when we were alive, but we met here. It's not my fault, my dear, that we didn't know each other. I regret it very much. You are my copy. We are like two peas in a pod. All I can and must do for you is to find your murderer and to punish him. It is a matter of honor, and I will do my best to do it. Pretty soon you'll be an uncle. Kristen and I are expecting triplets. Too bad you won't get to see your nephews. May you rest in peace and rest in peace and rest in peace." Scott sobbed on the sidelines, terribly ashamed, his conscience burning him, and he whispered, "Forgive me, my children. My mother and I have made a mess of things. We have maimed not only our own but your destinies as well. We have torn you apart, severed the thread between you, and lived in peace. I have only now realized what I have done. I'm so ashamed. Forgive me. It's my cross to live with." Henry quietly walked over, hugged his father tightly, patted him on the back. "That's it, Daddy. Don't beat yourself up. Let's live in the present. We have a lot to talk about. I want to know everything about you and your brother, down to the last detail. It's very important to me." A couple of weeks later, an excited Jason called Henry and told him, "I have news. We found your brother's killer. It's his wife's lover, Michael. He's the man you saw in Olivia's yard. Sadly, the lust for money and profit decided that, too. We discreetly bugged Olivia's house and went through the security cameras on the stretch of road where Christopher was shot. We didn't have to wait long. The lovers, indulging in their pleasures, told us everything themselves. There was evidence on the tape, and the sawed-off shotgun used to kill Christopher was homemade, so it's unaccounted for. We've got them both under investigation now, giving evidence, putting the blame on each other. Once again, your intuition was right. You identified the scoundrel unmistakably. I could have you on my staff." Henry grinned bitterly. "No, I'm doing a great job as a cook. It's a shame about my brother. He obviously didn't expect such a stab in the back from the person closest to him. This is the first time I've seen this, and I keep thinking, have people gone completely insane or has the world gone crazy? How can you kill a loved one for the sake of these damn papers? Is happiness measured by them?" Jason sighed. "You're right. It's not about the money, but many people seem to have forgotten that. You'll see more than that in our service." Scott collapsed with a heart attack when he learned that Christopher's death was on his wife's conscience. He cried, hated her, and blamed himself for not keeping his son safe. He saw that Olivia didn't love him at all. Henry visited him every day, carried fruit. They talked a lot, became much closer. It was at that moment when Henry saw his father with those dead, lifeless eyes, full of tears, so old and helpless all at once, that he realized that he loved him very much and was very afraid of losing him. And he didn't care about the old grudges. The main thing was that his father was there. They had found each other, and he should appreciate every moment spent together. Soon the news that the famous businessman Foley had a twin son spread all over town. And all those detractors who had been endlessly rehashing poor Kristen's bones fell silent, secretly jealous of her. How could she have seen the wealthy heir in an ordinary drifter? Kristen's pregnancy, despite the triplets, went easily. Except that in the last term she looked like a little colossus, not walking, but rolling. Henry never left her side, literally dusting her off. Kristen and Scott's company had merged into one big corporation. The experienced businessman was managing it skillfully, and Kristen exhaled peacefully. She could now step back and enjoy her position. Henry continued to work as a cook. He was so captivated by the profession that he pampered his beloved at home with delicacies and interesting gourmet dishes. Scott was also responsible, and despite Kristen's protests, he literally stormed into children's stores, buying up everything. He was anxiously awaiting the birth of his grandchildren, dreaming of taking care of them and thanking God that he had met his son. The businessman's life was now full and real again. Richie grew up to be a huge black beauty, but he was still the kindest dog by nature. He was the family pet and mascot, because it was thanks to him Henry met Kristen. And every night, our heroine, snuggling up to her beloved, thought how good it was that she listened to her heart, and despite the gossip of others, she fell in love with the tramp, let him into her life because Henry was the best husband in the world. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.